Hello, I'm Roger Mudd. Welcome to the History Channel. Our concept of wealth and power changes with civilization. Today, men and women try to conquer the business world. Centuries ago, the most ambitious tried to conquer the entire world. Our program looks at some of history's remarkable conquerors: Alexander, Napoleon, Genghis Khan. When wealth was measured in military victories and nations conquered, they were far and away the world's wealthiest men and the most brutal. Join us now as the History Channel presents Wealth and Power, Tyrants and Plunderers.
He was a charismatic young king and a brave warrior in search of glory. Alexander the Great believed he was chosen by the gods to lead his people. In 336 BC, Alexander inherited the Kingdom of Macedonia, the largest, most affluent nation in the Greek Empire. At the age of 20, he controlled one of the greatest armies in the world. He led a cavalry numbering over 1,800 men, an army of more than 40,000, and set out on a campaign through his kingdom. But a rumor of Alexander's death spurred a revolt in the city of Thebes. Alexander marched over 200 miles and demanded the city surrender. When they refused, Alexander attacked. He destroyed the city, ordered 6,000 killed, sold survivors into slavery.
You have what you could call the principle of the economy of violence, which is if you take over a city, first thing you do is you execute some people. And you show that you're willing to do it. And if you do it right away, you don't have any more trouble.
Alexander had proved his dominance of the Greeks, but it wasn't enough. He set his sights on the incredible wealth of the Persian Empire just to the east, a land his father had tried to conquer before him. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander led his army on a bloody campaign into Persia. But he did more than just command his regiments and battalions. Alexander fought side by side with the best of his men.
He was in the field with them, eating the same dust every day that they ate and suffering the same thirst and the same deprivation. They loved that in their ruler.
He worked as hard, if not harder, than any of his men, and that's obviously something that people who fought with him liked.
Alexander strengthened that loyalty when he fulfilled the prophecy of the Gordian knot. The age-old legend promised all of Asia to the one man who could untangle the huge knot tied with no visible ends. Alexander sliced through it with his sword and declared himself Lord of Asia. It was a prophecy he would fulfill. Alexander set off with his army and conquered from the Mediterranean all the way to India. En route, he established more than 70 new cities, many of them named, not surprisingly, Alexandria.
Up to the time of Alexander, most cities were concentrated around a palace, a fortress, or a temple. But when Alexander founded new cities in North Africa or in the middle of Asia, he founded them on the Greek model. They were cities of commerce. So he spread the idea of commerce, and he helped to start modernizing a very archaic world.
He put Greeks and Macedonians firmly in control and left them to rule as he and his army moved on. By 330 BC, Alexander dominated all of the Persian Empire. His unprecedented power led him to believe he was more than human. Alexander thought of himself as a god.
You have to understand that in those days, except for the Jews, nobody believed in a god who couldn't be human. The Greek myths are full of people who became gods, and he's in the process of dominating absolutely everywhere. So it's not too illogical a step for him to be seized, the more powerful he gets, with this vision of himself as a living god.
Alexander launched one more campaign in the spring of 327 BC, leading 35,000 troops into India. It would be his last conquest. The brave commander, who had survived years of combat, died of a sudden fever in 323 BC. He was 33 years old. Alexander's vast empire quickly crumbled as his generals and commanders grappled for power. But the man who came to be known as Alexander the Great achieved in death what he couldn't quite in life.
There were romances written about him, there were monuments created, and he was, certainly after his death, he became a godlike figure that was worshipped as probably no other ruler in the ancient period.
He lived at a time when the people hardly knew their neighbor in the next valley, much less all the way across the other continent. So Alexander brought the world together. He founded new cities, and he took this thing of Greek culture and he began to spread it around the world. Greek values, Greek learning, and the Greek system of commerce.
But not all legendary rulers are celebrated for their good deeds. Some are better remembered for their atrocities. None more so than the brutal warrior who descended from the Mongolian mountains to build what would eventually become the largest land empire in all of history. When we continue, Genghis Khan. A 150 years after Alexander the Great died, King Ptolemy IX of Egypt melted down Alexander's gold sarcophagus to make coins. The whole city of Alexandria was infuriated, and within a year, Ptolemy was killed.